This episode of the Off-Road Podcast is sponsored by Warren Medical Gear Outfitters and Colby Valve.
Off-Road Podcast, episode 417, Rugged Rocks.
Tonight, Aaron wins his own shooting match again. Coy finally fixes his car, and Ben almost ends up on the news.
Oh no, there it is. Welcome to the Off-Road Podcast, the podcast about everything off-road. We cover the news, review products, and interview people in the off-road industry. Your hosts tonight are Aaron, Coy, and my name is Ben, and later tonight we'll be joined by Steven from Rugged Rocks. And welcome to the show. So,
all right, Ben, we're absolutely dying to hear the details about how you almost ended up on the news. So you might as well just start.
All right. Well, I'll start.
Buckle up, everybody. This is going to be a story.
Buckle up, Buttercup, because this is a story. I'm going to start off with what I did leading up to this, because I was getting ready for a camping trip, right?
Yes.
So got the 4Runner put back together. There's the front end. Got the coils on. Everything's back on. Got the bump stops on. That was lots of fun. Hopped in the rear. Only had to knock out one of the bolts for the rear bump stop.
This is old news. This is last week. You talked about this last week.
No, I didn't have everything finished.
Oh, well, you showed this picture last week.
Did I finished that one? Oh, that was the front one. Whatever. I did the back ones too. I only had one I had to knock out of the back.
Okay.
Got my camera installed.
Yep. You showed us that picture last week.
No.
You said I was on the group chat. It wasn't on the show.
Yeah.
Oh, that was a group chat.
This is a great pod, guys. Great pod.
Terrible podcast. All right. We left Wednesday to go. Pete left Wednesday, got up there, set up camp, and was camping. He didn't get up everything set up till like 3:00 in the morning. We got there Thursday. We were there by 1:00. Pete was sleeping all day because he was tired. Also wasn't feeling well. We get there, get camp set up. Everything's great. I had to do an alignment in the morning before we left, so it kind of delayed us leaving on time.
I'm sure that's a quality alignment.
Yeah.
So did you have the trailer hooked up when you pulled it on the alignment rack?
No.
That would have been awesome if you had.
That would have been pretty cool. But I just
Coy, you know when he says he had to do an alignment, he doesn't have an alignment rack at his house. Ben did the alignment.
No, Ben, I didn't do the alignment. I took it somewhere and got it aligned.
Okay.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, you talked about doing your taco tabs or something. I thought maybe that was how you did it.
I had to get it retowed because with the different struts, the angle is a little different.
So all right, Ben. I need the meat and potatoes of this story here.
So that day my kid almost drowns, gets saved. The next morning, Pete's still.
So is that what you would have been almost got on the news for? Is your child drowning?
That's one of the things that I was almost on the news for. The next morning, Pete's not feeling well. His wife gives him a COVID test. This is the same trip that we are recreating to go tubing where he got COVID before and he had COVID again. So we're like, oh, maybe we should call it. And we go tubing down the river. We get back and there's some dudes with 2 generators. They're parked like 10 feet away from us. And it's like, this is not looking to be a good weekend. So screw it. We're going to call it. And we head out. I go over I-90 and I'm getting some trailer sway coming down I-90 and I'm using the trailer brakes to slow me down. Get on 18 and I'm going down Tiger Mountain and I'm getting even more trailer sway. I'm thinking it's maybe I loaded the trailer wrong and because I wasn't having that problem on the way there.
Hang on 1 second, Ben. I want to bring Steven in because I want to make sure that he can hear the rest of the story as Paul Harvey would put it. So real quick, we've got Steven from Rugged Rocks. Can you hear us all right, Steven?
Yeah. Thanks for having me, guys. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you
Little,
going to be able
little loud?
You're going to be able to mock Ben with us now? Just want to make sure our audio's good. All right.
Yeah, I think we're all
Okay,
good.
so all right, so where we're left off for our listeners is Ben's coming down from where he's at to down to his house. There's quite a bit of elevation drop, and it's over a lot of miles.
There's 2 passes you got to go over, and 3 different highway / interstates I go 4 that I go on. So I go down 18 down Tiger Mountain, getting lots of trailer sway. Take the interchange from 410 or from 18 to 167. Now on that interchange is the really big loop. My wife was following me. She had brought her car because the next day she had to work, and originally I was going to stay the whole weekend. So she wasn't going to be there. She was going to leave. So she's behind me and she sees my wheel wobble, my rear passenger side wheel wobble. And I had just gotten a text from my son about her meeting me at Walmart with the kids. And I was going to take take my oldest home with me because he was in the car with her. Then she calls me and I'm like, I know I got Henry's damn message. Stop calling me while I'm driving. I was kind of just in a mood. And because the whole swaying down, I was kind of starting to feel a little white knuckled with how the trailer was loaded. I felt the trailer was loaded. She's like, no, I saw your wheel wobble. And I was like, oh, that's not good. So I'm looking for a spot to pull over. And I know there's a spot where there's an exit and it's got a very wide median in the middle of the exit and the highway so that it could pull in there and have space to walk around the 4Runner and check out the wheels. I'd stopped at North Bend and I'd inspected the wheels and everything. Everything looked good. As I'm pulling into that spot, I begin stopping and I'm using the trailer brake, turned up the trailer brakes. Because if you have an electric trailer brake controller, you can increase the sensitivity. So I bumped up the sensitivity on that, and I apply the brakes, and I watch my rear passenger tire pass me by.
I've had nightmares about that.
Yeah. My new bump stops, I mean, just timbering off-road. The off-road bump stops work really well. I hardly felt my rear end set down, but there's a mark left from the bump stop bumping it hard. So the bump stop worked amazing. The tire passed me and went into a ditch about 50 feet down into a ditch. And from what I can tell from looking at my lug nuts, because I had 3 snapped lug nuts and 3 still there.
You mean lugs?
Lug studs. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
3 lugs. It looks like I forgot to. Well, I know I did not recheck my torque after I was done installing everything. I usually have a thing where I put everything back together, and when I finish a side, I torque the wheels down, and then I go through and check all 4 torques again, just because. But because it was 90 whatever degrees out and I was hot, I was tired, I said, screw it, I'm done. And I never retorqued them and I never checked them. So do yourself a favor. If you have a gut feeling that you didn't do something, recheck it. Otherwise, you're going to be chasing your tire or watching it pass you by. I was very upset with myself.
Eric wants to know if your body trim is already missing or if the tire popped it off.
The tire popped it off. I've got it in the back seat, so I'll reattach it.
So Ben, without fail, on any trip, loses a piece of body cladding.
Yeah. I'd rather lose body cladding than parts. But
why didn't you? You need to be. I feel like this was just whatever God it is that forces this body cladding to come off. you need to just pull a piece off halfway through a trip because do
it preventative body cladding yank. Yeah,
like
that's not a bad idea.
if you just yanked one of those body claddings off, you would have been totally fine. Those bolts wouldn't have loosened or been over tightened or whatever it was. You got to be careful. Like that body cladding's coming off one way or another. It might as well be you that does it on purpose.
Well, have you ever started a trip missing a body part from the beginning? Because maybe you just leave a piece off and never have to worry about it.
Leave it at home.
Yeah. I did leave the one that was on my driver's side door off for a couple trips.
And how did that go?
I never lost anymore.
See, I think that's the solution right there.
Yeah, it might be.
But
well, so how long did you have to wait for a tow truck?
So that happened about 9:00 at night, even though the pictures show it's light out. It's that time of year. I was there till midnight. I didn't get home officially until
I would have cut a tree down, strapped it under your axle, and drove home. I'm not.
So we have towing through my insurance. I called insurance. I was a little distraught and upset. The reason I'd gone out of town was the day my dad passed away, and I was planning on being out of town for that, kind of just to decompress and forget about it and all that. And that was the day I came home and all of this happened. So I was kind of like, I don't know, into a mental crisis at the time. It was just like spazzing out, messaging people and talking to them, and just like waiting for it and not realizing how much time was passing. So I'd messaged insurance. I said, hey, I've got my trailer. I'm on the side of the road right here. I need a tow for my vehicle and my trailer. I start calling about 10:30. I called them. I'm like, hey, I still haven't heard anything from the driver. They call, they say, oh, the driver's wrapping up a call. He'll be there soon. No, Josh. And then
the Toyota guys don't want you anymore, man. You're giving us a bad rep.
Yeah, apparently the Toyota guys hate me now. I am giving you guys a good bad rep. So I'm sitting there, and he's finishing up a tow. I'm like, okay, cool. I gave it like another 30 minutes. I call again. Yep, he's still finishing up the tow. It's taking longer than he's expecting. And then he calls me and he's like, I'm 15 minutes down the road. This tow took a whole lot longer than expected. I'll be there shortly. He shows up like 11:45, 12 o'clock. And then he's like, how are you getting your trailer home? And I went on a verbal tirade. And then I was like, you know what? F it. I'll figure it out. I'll get the trailer taken care of. Just get my rig loaded on the trailer and get moving. I called my neighbor. He fortunately had gone to bed early, and his alarm clock is the same sound as his phone calls. And he hadn't been drinking because it was a Friday night. He'd gotten off work. He usually has a couple beers. He hadn't drank anything. And so I called him, and he was there within 10 minutes and had the trailer loaded before my 4Runner was fully loaded.
Oh, wow. My.
And we got back to the house before the 4Runner was there.
What kind of tow truck was it? It wasn't a flat deck one?
It was a flat deck one.
Oh, usually those guys have a stinger out the back. They can tow a trailer while they have a.
He said he didn't have the proper equipment to tow it properly.
Wow.
So yeah,
I would have left it there and made him go back and get it.
I wasn't in the mood. I was just getting stuff done.
Oh, well, that's a bummer.
I am very fortunate that I stopped when I did, and it didn't happen while I was driving at a high speed rate, because if I would have lost control, I probably would have rolled the rig, the trailer. I had the two younger boys with me. I'm just thankful that the way it happened was the way it happened, versus it could have been a whole lot worse than just setting it down and ruining a shock that I was planning on taking off anyways. A caliper that could probably use replacing. It's a little early for it, but whatever.
It's got some weight reduction.
And I really got to test out those bump stops, which, hey, I was waiting on that anyways. So I don't know. Things worked out the way they did. And I'm here to tell a tale rather than, bigger problems.
Jesus, take the wheel.
No, Jesus, that's the wrong wheel. I mean that was like my whole thought the whole night is like, Jesus, when we say take the wheel, not that wheel. You took the wrong one. But whatever,
Josh says that you didn't even lose a wheel. Actually, with it being loose, Josh, it wobbled out his
oh yeah, the wheel's trash. I'm gonna have to replace the wheel. But the beadlock ring is still good. And it's the tech ring.
Wait, so it was wobbling enough that it ruined the wheel?
Oh yeah, it had been doing it. So what I thought was the trailer being out of weight was actually the wheel wobbling when I'd hit crappy road. So I don't know. I'm gonna have to figure out some new way of checking my
Honestly,
wheels.
I really planned on like full on making fun of you, but now I'm sad. It doesn't feel worth it now.
Well, thank you.
I've already feel sorry for you.
I've already beat the hell out of myself for this because at the end of the day, it comes down to me not double checking my torque.
Are you sure you didn't double check your torque, or did you over torque everything and that's what caused them to snap? I've seen more people lose wheels from over torquing than leaving them loose. Honestly,
you did get that. You did get that new Ooga Dooga Milwaukee.
Well, I have the Ooga Dooga 2000. I did only do it till I heard one Dugga, which is generally not tight enough to over torque it. Because then I like to go around and with my other 3 wheels when I torqued them, and I went through and I rechecked them, all their torque was good. With the torque wrench.
Honestly, Ben, I would no longer use a Dugga or an Ugga as a form of measurement.
No. Usually, no. What I was doing is I'll just zip them on, and then I go through and with the torque wrench and check them, just to get it on there to get the wheel pulled up tight.
Honestly, when I was younger, one of my brother's friends was at my dad's house because he had a little shop changing brakes on his a Chevy pickup, and he asked how tight he should put his lugs on. And as I'm walking by, I'm like, 3 Ugga Duggas on that impact, jokingly, and then I was just moving on. He took it fully to heart, went 3 Ugga Duggas, drove away, and totally lost a wheel. So
no,
my fault.
But I checked when we got to camp, I checked my lugs to see that you have to actually look down in there, and they were there when we were at camp. And I found, let's see, where's that picture? You can see the 3 studs missing. I found 2 of those. They're on my shelf of shame with my rod from my JK. So, yeah.
Well, with your old wheel, you can make like a cool coffee table or something,
I'm getting concrete in the shop tomorrow. I just got the call today. So who knows? That'll probably be something I do, is some little table in the shop, and it'll be on that wheel. Or I'll mount it on the wall and call it
turn it into a hose reel for outside. Just screw it to the outside of your shop and wrap a hose around it.
There you go.
Make a fan, ceiling fan. Well, my weekend was not as exciting as yours, Ben. I'm going to be totally honest. I just caught up on some things. I finally got my actual trailer put away in the shop. I went ahead, finished unloading my truck from the GRU trip, put my seats all back in, and then finally put my MR2 back together and drove that around a little bit. Really just a slick, easy weekend. Took it pretty laid back, caught up on some stuff.
What you didn't do this? You know what you didn't do this weekend?
What?
Win a pistol shooting competition.
I did not win a pistol. I've never, honestly, unlike some of us, I've never won any shooting competition. I'm thinking about hosting my own. But
well, that's the best way to win.
That's why I hear.
I invited you to come.
I had arrangements I had to take care of, or I would have.
I know.
How did that go?
I just got to rub it in. Well, I didn't win, even though that's what we said in the tonight. I came in third place this year, which is that's a kick in the groin to not win my own shooting competition finally.
Were you shooting left-handed or something?
I did the whole thing blindfold and I came in third place.
After you came in third, I'm not left-handed. I mean, that's pretty good.
No, I just had some guys show up that were really good. One of them, he and I traded spots back and forth because we did 5 different matches basically, and he just overall his time was faster than my time, so he did a great job. I can't win my own shooting competitions anyway. I can come in first, but I can't win them anyway.
You timed this one?
We time every one of them. They're all timed.
The first one I did with you was just accuracy. It was no timing.
For pistol shooting?
I don't remember there being a time.
Yeah, well, I know the rifle one was accuracy, so anyways, yeah, so I had that shooting competition. Also, so that was Saturday. Sunday, I drove deep into the heart of Washington and went to a guy's house who had a Nissan Frontier that was crashed, and I dropped his whole rear end out from underneath it and loaded it in my truck and brought it home. I'm pretty sure it's compatible. Oh, I know it's compatible. I know everything's compatible in it. I just hope that it's good on the inside. I didn't get a chance to test it because it wasn't really a running truck. So I did jumpstart his truck so I could test it out, and it started spraying ATF out of a hose that wasn't connected to the radiator anymore. And it sprayed I had the passenger door of my wife's truck open, and it sprayed the door card, which was super awesome. That's really what you want to do with some ATF, is spray the inside of your wife's truck with it. So there's that. But it took me about an hour and 20 minutes to drop that axle from underneath the truck. And that included jacking it up, drop it all the way out and load it in the back of my truck. I felt pretty good about that. And it was 90 degrees outside. I brought my Milwaukee 18-volt cordless fan with me, and I just had it on the ground where I was laying in the gravel. That was a game changer, having a fan blowing on me while I was working underneath that truck in the sun. So, Steven, have you done anything off-road related in the last week or two?
Little bit, not anything too serious. We were going to go up to Big Bear, do a little wheeling on Saturday, but Jeep Jamboree was going on, so there's a couple hundred rigs going up there. And so the day before we left, we're like, let's postpone that one. So
is there still snow up at Big Bear?
No, it's all melted now. There's still snow, in the Sierras, like Central California. We were up there a few weeks ago, and there's still a good amount up on some back roads. Lots of water flowing though, everywhere, all over the state. It's crazy. So yeah, in the canyons, even in Rancho Cucamonga, just outside of town, lots of water. So. But yeah, Saturday, instead of going up to Big Bear, we went to breakfast, but we took the back way, of course. So we went through a little venture through the hills, got some breakfast early in the morning, and then later that evening, there was crawlers and coffee at a local stereo shop, and the owners of that stereo shop, yeah, they wheel. So a lot of local guys, a lot of guys that play at Johnson Valley. A lot of the more hardcore guys were showing up and had a powwow, had some tacos, and just chatted up those guys for a little bit. So not really much wheeling, but still within the circles. So it's good, but looking to get out. Hopefully in a couple weeks, we'll get back up to Big Bear and go run some trails. So there's a couple things that have changed up there I want to go check out.
Very cool.
Yeah. So nothing too crazy at the moment, but it's coming.
We also want to thank our sponsor, Patriot Patch. Head over to patriotpatch.co and check out their selection of great patches, shirts, cleaning mats, signs, and stickers. You can also join the Patch of the Month Club for $15 and receive a patch, matching sticker, and artist proof each month.
And let's not forget our patches. We've said it a billion times, $13 shipped in the United States. And any additional patches are $10. reach out to us, and we can hook you up with a link.
Have tire troubles ever left you deflated? Colby Valve has got you covered. Ever have a valve stem leak? Colby Valve makes reusable and easily replaceable valve stems that don't require you to remove your tire from the wheel. They work with your off-road rig, ATV, side-by-side, commuter vehicle, or even your tractor. Never be left stranded again because of a busted valve stem. They also have a tire repair kit for those punctures that keep you away from doing your favorite thing, wheeling. Make sure to check out colbyvalve.com or ask for them at your local off-road products store.
Have tire troubles ever left you deflated? How about wheel troubles?
Yes.
Oh man.
Well, guys,
Coy, you're
jumping the news here.
Yeah.
So Polaris wins the Michigan grant to build an off-road charging network. This is an article we pulled off of Autoblog. 2 years ago, Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer's office announced the Lake Michigan EV Circuit, a network of level 2 and DC fast chargers covering a tourist-heavy corridor along Lake Michigan. The Mobility Public-Private Partnership and Programming, that's the MP4 they call it, because that's quite a mouthful, Mobility Public-Private Partnership and Programming, is providing Minnesota-based power sports company Polaris a $700,000 grant to build a charging network for electric off-highway vehicles along a 120-mile stretch of public off-road trail system in the Upper Peninsula. So seems weird that like Polaris was granted this, to be honest. Like, how many people applied, honestly? The charge point
Polaris.
Yeah,
I mean, could Jeep have?
Polaris and maybe a Chinese company.
Well, what about a company like Jeep applying for it? Because I mean, Jeep did that for Moab, and aren't they doing it?
But these are
and all that. I mean, it's money for them to do it.
This is not a highway vehicle. It's only off-road. It's a off-highway. I don't know. The charge points are said to be an integrated, scalable charging solution designed with solar production capability that can be grid-connected or operate completely off-grid and will work with trail-approved electric rigs like side-by-sides, ATVs, motorcycles, and snowmobiles. Polaris will send Hamilton North Coast Adventures, a Polaris adventure outfitter in Ontonago. I don't know how to say that, guys. Ontonago, Michigan.
That sounds good.
Ontonago. Fleet of Ranger XP kinetic UTVs for them to rent out. Polaris has been ramping up production of its battery electric Ranger, which commenced deliveries this year. It's weird that they won that as soon as their electric side-by-side came out. Like, it's almost like they knew ahead of time.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I think that's cool, though, that there's an off-road, like, big circuit they're putting electric charging in. Like, that's pretty cool.
They call it an electric OHV area, but they do in here say that it's for side-by-sides, ATVs, motorcycles, and snowmobiles. So it doesn't sound like it's for full-size rigs or anything like that. So maybe that's why Polaris got it, not people like Jeep. I'm not too much into the side-by-side market, but I don't know of. I think there's one company that sells like dedicated. They only sell electric UTVs or side-by-sides, and then Polaris, I think, is the only other one that sells anything with an electric option at this point.
Bro, Tamiya's coming out with their 1/1 scale buggy now. That's like any day now.
Yeah. I thought it was 7/8 scale or something. I don't know.
Yeah, whatever.
I don't know.
There's
It's a future market, and maybe they're just trying to get a foothold in it. I mean, more vehicles and more companies. I've seen a lot of dirt bikes and quads and stuff. So, I mean, I think Polaris is probably just trying to get ahead of the game and be there before, like, Tesla says, "Oh, we're going to put our charging station," so that becomes the standard for that, like it has for now motor vehicles.
Yeah, I honestly see the electric dirt bikes catching on more and more. Like, I'm not a dirt bike rider, but a crazy torque And like, how much better is it to ride a dirt bike that's totally quiet? I mean, I guess there's some guys are gonna like that brop, but it just seems like such a better experience for it to be almost
Jeremy was not a fan of them. And his big thing was you couldn't hear them coming around a corner, and on like a blind corner, it could be dangerous.
Oh no, that's for other people though. I'm talking about riding experience. They can pile their Jeep into the ditch avoiding me, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting with electric motorcycles because anytime you're shifting, well, I don't know, it's going to be a completely different ball game, I think, really, when it comes down to it. Because if you've grown up or been on motorcycles for any period of time, you know, you're listening to the bike, you're feeling the bike, you know when to shift. You know, you're not staring at a tack or anything like that. It's you're listening and feeling everything that's going on, and to have all of that go away and to just have the bike move, it's kind of weird to me. I'm curious. I haven't ridden one yet, but I'm very curious.
I don't see it really yet, but I'm hoping that we get more two-wheel drive motorcycles out of the electric community. Throw a hub motor up front and send some juice up there, and two-wheel drive motorcycle.
Yeah, to a certain extent. I don't know how powerful those hubs are, but I could see that having some appeal.
Yeah. Well, we got another story here. This one's from The Drive, and it's about a Mercedes Sprinter camper van that ends up on a Jeep trail, and the owners don't have any trail experience. So, yeah, here's a picture of it precariously three-wheeling off the side of the trail. So these people who did this apparently had zero experience off-roading, and they took their new Sprinter van out and they took it to the Honeymoon Trail in Utah, which I don't know anything about that trail at all, but later in the article it mentions that it is one of the most difficult trails in America. So I find that pretty interesting. But Matt's Off-Road and Recovery had to go recover them. There's actually a video in our show notes, a link in our show notes that says if you want to go watch that. So the owner confessed that he had about 4 hours of off-road driving under his belt before he got his Mercedes stuck in some loose gravel.
So I just looked up the Honeymoon Trail, like its rating and all that. It's rated a 3. It's ideal for those looking for an easy afternoon.
Well, this article comes from The Drive, who I believe is a car blog, not a off-road blog specifically, although we've gotten quite a few articles from him.
So it says it's an easy trail, mostly requiring two-wheel drive from
my goodness
downwards, unless rain and inclement weather has made muddy conditions.
Someone was taking some liberties when they wrote this article. Then when they say this video for Matt's Off-Road Recovery, you get to see exactly why off-roading a Sprinter van on one of America's most difficult trails with very little experience is not going to be a good time. So,
I mean, obviously there's some difficulty if you've only been driving off-road for 4 hours total.
So I'll put it this way, Aaron. The BLM website says the Honeymoon Trail during the late 19th and early 20th century was a primitive wagon road and the principal route between Mormon settlements in northeast Arizona and southern Utah. So I'm guessing it's about like the McGrew Trail. Like this was an old wagon road. So
yeah, there's some good wagon roads. The McGrew Trail was a wagon road. And then we got some wagon roads up in Washington that are pretty good. But not the hardest trail in America.
Yeah, so, I see another one where they're calling it moderately difficult.
Yeah. Well, literally, it does say that
rating at a 3. So
it does say that the Sprinter van was driven out without any assistance from another vehicle. So it wasn't actually stuck. It just the driver lacked experience and skill to get it out. So Matt says it wasn't an easy drive. It had raised suspension, all-terrain tires, and all the extra weight on it. It just wasn't made. He says it isn't made for rock crawling, but once again, I'm starting to doubt this article as being like having all the facts. It sounds like they're trying to add some drama where there isn't drama.
I'd say watching the video would probably really tell you how difficult and driver skill always comes into account, right?
Yeah.
Maybe the guy wasn't skilled, but I like his common sense. Like, most guys will just keep going till they roll over the cliff eventually. Like, at least he was like, I can't do it anymore. I got to call for help.
That's our job as a man.
Driven out, and it is 100% okay. He doesn't need to get another one. Like,
no.
I'd way rather have that ending than like I kept trying to make it and then trashed my $150,000 4x4 Sprinter we had. So,
yeah,
maybe a dumb move going out there with 4 hours off-road experience, but at least he knew when to call it.
Yeah.
And there was someone good to call to help with it.
Absolutely.
Well, our next news article here is from Motorsports Newswire, and California judge rules in favor of SEMA against Ecologic to protect motorized recreation at Oceano Dunes. So Superior Court judge in San Luis Obispo County ruled that the California Coastal Commission does not have the authority to prohibit motorized recreation and overnight camping access at the Oceano Dunes State Vehicle Recreation Area. So an area that was set up for motor vehicles to go to. The hippies can't tell them to shut it down. The judge, Tanya Coates, ruled in favor of the Specialized Equipment Market Association, Ecologic Partners, a legal collaboration between Off-Road Business Association, ORBA, America Sand Association, ASA, and American Motorcyclist Association, AMA, and Friends of Oceano Dunes. The ruling that the Coastal Commission abused its discretion by unilaterally ordering the elimination of an OHV use at the Oceano Dunes. So that's awesome.
That's a huge win because
that is.
I think this has been going on for a few years now down there.
Yeah,
is that someplace you go, Stephen?
I've never been there. I know quite a few people that have been going there for generations, actually, and it's a very popular place. And this whole legal battle has been going on for a few years, and there's some land use people that I've been in touch with over the last few years, just trying to keep an eye on it. And it seemed like the odds were heavily against our favor. And when this news came out, finding out that we're going to be all right, I was honestly very surprised. So it's not very often we have good news like this after a legal battle that gets this heated. So very surprised, but grateful all the same. So
I've heard that the California Coastal Commission is like borderline evil. So
yeah, I don't know a lot about them in particular, but I know that this whole scenario over the beach there has just been brutal. If I remember correctly, there was they basically had opened up something for public comments, and a ton of off-road people showed up. Like, they were supposed to make a ruling on this a few years ago. Tons of people showed up, and then they ended up postponing it all. I don't know if they got scared or what it was, but there was a lot of people showed up, and I think they really clued in at that point. So.
I know a few years back, a guy on the coast somewhere, like the sand was like washing away under the foundation of his house, and there's like a cliff, and he like put big riprap rock there, and the Coastal Commission was like, yeah, you can't do that, and made him haul it all out, just let the ocean take his house. Like they just
that's crazy.
Yeah, and I've heard like this could have had very big effects for places like Pismo Beach and a few other of the dune locations along the California coast. So this is a great win for us, but definitely one that
surprising.
We do not need to take lightly, because there's still other fights that are going to be going on.
Oh, yeah.
And hats off to those organizations. I had not heard about the Off-Road Business Association until recently, and right away I hear an article about them. Like, oh, well, that's really cool. So,
yeah, there's a lot of land use problems going on constantly. It's actually pretty astonishing when you really start looking into it and you look at the open issues that these different land use organizations are battling all the time. And they have different publications and newsletters and postings on their websites and stuff, keeping people updated. But to be honest with you, it's a lot of verbiage that I think goes way deeper than is really necessary for the average wheeler to just kind of get the gist of what's going on. I think they lose the audience. If they can summarize it so it's quick and easy to read and digest by the general public, then I think it would, the news would travel a lot farther, a lot easier. But these cases are so complex and more complex than I thought they should ever become. As with most people, probably don't realize how complicated these issues become. But yeah, you start reading about it, and it just seems like it's endless. There's a lot of stuff going on in Utah right now, both up near Sand Hollow as well as out in Moab. I mean, those are the two that come to mind most immediately, but it's constantly something. And a lot of these things get drawn out for years, or they essentially get put on hold for one reason or another. And so you kind of forget about them, but then they surface back up and they end up back in court. And it's like, oh yeah, we started that 5 years ago, 10 years ago, whatever it is. And it's just crazy. So I would encourage you guys, if you don't already, stay in tune with like Blue Ribbon Coalition and like Corva down here in California. Take a look at their websites, or even give them a call and be like, what's new, and see if you can just try to stay in the loop, because it's hard to keep up. And when you are trying to keep up, the amount of information they have and the terminology that they use is really hard to like sink in. And unless you're in the legal field, it's tough just even trying to
it would
stay in
be
the loop.
really cool if there was a list that someone kept, like, of these organizations. These are the ones we are currently fighting for. This is their status. These are the ones we've won, and these are the ones we've lost. That way people can be like, wow, I've lost a lot of trails in my area, and there's these ones that are at risk, and these ones were saved because we fought hard enough, and we need to continue to fight.
We're actually working. We're working to have the Off-Road Business Association on our podcast here in the next month or two. So we'll have to nail them down and ask a couple of those questions.
Yeah, and what you're describing is something that I had some conversations with some of these organizations with recently as well. Is not even just a list, but if there was a map that was published online that kind of aggregated all of the current issues across all of the organizations, so people can just stay in the loop visually. What's close to me and what's the current status. And if you would like to donate to the organization that's on the front lines of fighting that issue, then have a way to donate through there as well. In my opinion, and I'm not, part of any of these organizations from like a leadership, or, I'm not in the courtrooms or anything, but I do try to stay informed. And it seems from my perspective that it's difficult to raise money sometimes for causes that you're unsure where the money's actually going, right? You're like, if you become a member of any of these organizations, like, okay, it's going to help, but where specifically is it helping? What are they fighting right now? So I think just more transparency with the current issues would also help raise funding to then help those issues, right? So it's like the more you know, the more you're willing to help, at least in my mind. I'm not too sure, but it makes sense to me.
What you're saying is these 4x4 organizations need to take a page out of the Starving Children one, where they send you a picture of the child you fed. They need like send you a picture of the gate that you opened.
Right. Yeah. Something along those lines. Yeah, right. Something. But yeah, but it is a lot of information, which is part of their challenge, right? Because their primary goal is to work on the problem, and I think they become short-staffed also to help disseminate the information, the latest information, in a easy to digest way. So yeah, there's I think some things that could be done there, and hopefully we'll see some of those things shift in the near future.
Definitely would be good to hear. And we'll definitely have to be asking these questions.
Go prepared with Warren Industries. They produced the first recreational winch in 1959 and lead the industry with their dedication to quality and reliability. When you dig yourself in deep, make sure you have the right tools to get yourself out. Get Warren equipped and go where others can't. Now, let's get ready for adventure and head into our main topic.
Well, tonight we are joined by Stephen from Rugged Rocks and Rugged Routes. But before we jump in the meat and potatoes of those, we got to find out a little more about Stephen here. So we're going to start off with the Fast 5 Facts. Coy, you're up.
All right, man. We're just going to shoot from the hip here. New or old vehicle?
Go for it. Old.
Old vehicle. All right. Surprise from a Nissan guy, but summer or winter camping?
Ooh. Can I pick in between? Yeah, I suppose summer. I would go with summer.
Okay. Rock, sand, snow, or mud?
Ooh, can I pick two? Rocks and snow.
Rocks and snow. Hey, that's really most people's choice. Favorite vehicle brand?
That's a given, right? Yeah, Nissan.
It's on the list. I have to ask it. Obviously, it's Nissan. But favorite tire?
BFG KM3s, I think, or the all trains, either the KO2s or the KM3s, depending on the rig and what you're doing. But yeah,
those are probably the by far the leading choice of tire that gets picked on that question. Any recommendations for someone new to off-roading? What would be your advice?
Oh, lots of advice. Don't go alone. Make sure you know how to actually engage your four-wheel drive. I've had that happen so many times. And teaching people about airing down. People don't understand that concept until they actually get out there. Like, what do you mean you let air out of your tires? So that's actually probably like number one, aside from carrying tools and tow straps and stuff like that. But yeah, I'd say I'd start there. Yeah.
All right, we're going to ask just some general questions about you, learn a little more about you, and then we're gonna talk about rugged stuff. So,
cool.
How did you get started in off-roading?
Well, I started playing in the dirt when I was 5 on a dirt bike. So I was on 2 wheels for quite a while. But I was kind of a mama's boy too, honestly. So I was kind of scared of the bike. But when I started driving, the Pathfinder became my first vehicle. So it was purchased brand new in my family. And my mom drove me to preschool in the Pathfinder that I wheel now. And then when I got into high school and started driving and I started wheeling and stuff, that's the vehicle that really sparked Rugged Rocks. I was part of a handful of online forums, realizing the shortcomings in the off-road industry, and dove in. So that was really the beginning of it in a nutshell, as small of a nutshell as I can make it. Oh, but as far as off-roading itself, I guess I should elaborate on that. We were actually out camping in the desert one time, and one of my dad's friends had an old CJ. His name's Rick, and my dad, he's like, "Hey, throw me the keys. I'm going to take my son for a ride real quick." Right behind camp, there was this huge hill. It was, at the time, it seemed near vertical. I've been back there since, and I'm like, okay, it's not near vertical, but at the time, it seemed like might as well just been on a rocket ship, and dropped this thing into low range. And I just tell my dad, like, "There's no way we're driving up this. Like, you're ridiculous." And sure enough, this thing just crawls straight to the top. And within a few minutes, we're on top of this ridge, just looking down on all the camps across the desert as far as you can see. It was just the coolest thing. And from that moment on, it was like I caught the bug, right? And at that point, I went from wanting four-wheel drive just to get to the mountains to go snowboarding to, all right, I'm going to be playing in the dirt for a long time. And yeah, I've been playing ever since. It's so many adventures over the years, aside from starting the company, but it was really me wanting to keep the Pathfinder and wheel it, and then realizing that the shortcomings in the aftermarket, being on the forums, seeing what other people were looking for, and then I started trying to fill the gaps.
Do you have a most embarrassing moment on the trail you want to share?
I have a few of those, I think. um, I'd say, yeah, we were on a trail in Big Bear years ago called Gold Mountain, and it was late winter, so there was a little bit of snow on the ground, but nothing serious. And there was a shop that had just built a 4-link for me, but they didn't really do it right, and I wasn't too happy with it when they first turned it out. But I figured I'd give it a shot. I wheel it and see how it goes. Well, it had bound up going up one of the obstacles on Gold Mountain, and the upper link where it attached the frame on the inside completely ripped the frame wide open like a tin can. And then I was bad. Then the pumpkin rotated up, broke the drive shaft, snapped my rear shocks in half. Everything got really crooked and springy and weird very quickly. So, yeah, it wasn't great. Luckily, though, I was able to, the rig was still rolling. I was able to tie the drive shaft out of the way, or what was left of it, and kind of limp it back down because it was all downhill. So it got turned around, went back down to the highway, called a tow truck. But because it was still late winter, the roads were still icy, and AAA and all the towing services locally were extremely busy because down here, is, you can imagine Southern California and winter don't mix very well, as you guys are probably well aware. And so the experience isn't there. And honestly, the conditions that we see down here in winter are pretty bad because we don't have long winters. Like winter will hit, and then you have a lot of slush and black ice, and they do what they can to get rid of it as fast as they can. But more than anything, they create a lot. Like it's almost like they make the situation worse before it gets better. So inevitably, you just have people just spun off the road all over the place. So Ben, just like you, I was waiting for a tow truck for a very long time. Eventually, me and my friends that were there, we were just like, screw it, we're gonna get pizza and beer. Wait till they call, and they eventually did. But quickly, one other story: we were out at Moab for an event, that a Nissan event gone Moab. We were crossing crossing the Golden Crack, and right when my rig got flexed out just about all the way, the spring in the rear suspension had gotten squished so far to the point where it was like U shape, and it just shot right out of the rig and went rolling down the rocks.
That's awesome.
So
that was pretty funny.
It wasn't a matter of limit straps. It just too smushed and
it was
sprung out, huh?
compressed. It was compressed too much. Yeah.
It was compressed so stinking far. And there's actually a video of it. I'll see if I can find it and shoot it off to you guys. But you hear it hit the floorboard of the rig, and then you hear the ding, 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 as it just went running down the rocks. And then I jumped out of the rig, and I wheel in sandals. I do everything in sandals and barefoot. I know it's terrible, but I do it. And so then I'm like full sprint in my rainbow sandals across the rocks in Moab, trying to go find my spring. And so we pulled the rig through the obstacle. It came out the other side, jacked it up, popped the spring back in. It was fine. But I've got coilovers in there now, and things are set up a bit different. But that was probably the most hilarious one, with a lot of customers and long-term friends on the trail. It was
funny. Side note, have they started doing Gone Moab again? I know that they stopped. Is it getting picked back up?
So I talked to the guys that run that. They ran into some issues this year, and it sounds like there's potential for the event to maybe not be in Moab anymore, maybe do something more St. George, Sand Hollow area in the future. But I can't confirm that right now. So that's something I'd want to double check on. But that's just kind of what I've heard lately. But we'll see what happens. So it's not dead, but it's definitely in a stage where it's under new management, and they're trying to pull things together in a different way. but it has been definitely not without its challenges. So we'll see.
Yeah, maybe we'll have to have them on again because we had them on.
We never had them on. They were scheduled to come on. Something fell through, and then the event got canceled. Then the events got canceled.
Oh, we had someone who's gone Moab on. That's right.
Yeah, we've had people that have gone Moab.
Do you have a biggest win on the trail?
Biggest win?
Yeah, your most glorious moment.
Glorious moment. I have a couple, but I'd say the most fun one was before straight axle swaps, before lockers, before any of it. Was wheeling a trail called Holcomb Creek up in Big Bear area, and this trail at the time was a pretty dense forest, lots of running water, very shaded, hands down my favorite trail in the forest. And the first time I had actually gone all the way through, I was in the Pathfinder, 30-inch tires, IFS, open, wheeling up this spot that's in a creek. And I got nervous because there's this big Jeep club that came up right behind us, and they're all set up, 35s minimum, locked front and rear. And we're talking, this is probably 12, 13, 14 years ago. Yeah, probably at least that. It was a long time ago. And I thought these guys were going to come up and be like, you don't belong here. You're not ready or any of that stuff. And I was willing to work it. I knew it was going to be work getting through, but one of the head guys from the club had pulled up, and he was super helpful. And some of the guys they were in there. I was stacking rocks. They were stacking rocks, and it took a long time to get through. Everything was wet. And when I got out the other side, I did put a dent in my rocker panel, which I was a little bummed about. But by the time I got through this, it was that fun. It was just a fun day. And I stood on top of the rock, and I have a picture like, I got through, and it wasn't smooth by any means, but the club that was there was super nice. They're like, hey, no rush. We're just going to stop for lunch. You do your thing. And then there was a whole bunch of other people that came in right afterwards, and they saw my rig on the other side of the obstacle, and they're like, how'd that get through there? And I was like, oh, dude, you just missed it. I just finished it. It's like, that's yours, And so it was fun. But my other big wins were mostly some stuff up in Johnson Valley, which it's fun, but it's also a bit nerve wracking given the history of the vehicle and the family, and we wanted to keep it in one piece and keep it straight. So although I've had some good wins in Johnson Valley, it's not without its stress. I white knuckle it a little bit more than I would if I was driving a different rig, but getting through like Sledgehammer or Aftershock or some of those is a really good time, but it's definitely not something I do every weekend. Just preserve the rig, and definitely want to go back and do it again, but I want to do it in something else.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where's your favorite place to go wheeling at?
Well, Big Bear's close, right? So that's kind of the default, but Moab is fun. It's hard to say, like, pick a top favorite. I think right now I'm kind of looking for a new favorite. I think I want to explore some more stuff up like Mammoth or Northern California, or head up north like Washington, Oregon area. Heading up that way, I think would be a lot of fun, actually.
There's nothing good up here.
Yeah. No, nothing fun. I think I like the forest though. So like if I'm gonna go camping and kind of like really get away from it all, I think heading up there I think would be a blast.
Sorry, we're full.
Yeah, there's lots of good stuff.
I figured you were being sarcastic. It was sinking in slowly. So I'm a little slow sometimes.
We got it all. We got beach. We got forest. We got desert. It's amazing here. Are there any places you want to go and wheel, obviously, that you just haven't made it to yet? Like anything that you've been wanting to do that you haven't got to?
Wheeling wise,
kind of bucket list, like you want to go there.
You know what I actually haven't done that I really want to do, and it's probably surprising to some people, is the Rubicon. I've never run the Rubicon, and we planned on doing it probably 10 or 12 years ago. Had a whole trip planned together, and guys took time off. Then there was a local fire that sprung up 2 days before we left, so we ended up changing plans and going up just outside of Fresno, like Shaver Lake area. And without really a good plan, we just kind of winged it, but we had a great time, but still, uh, no, no Rubicon trip. But there's some talk about maybe doing that before the end of the year. So we'll see.
Rubicon's on my list, my short list as well.
Nice.
All right, let's talk about Rugged Rocks here. So you kind of hinted at it, but can you tell us why did you choose Nissan?
This is what I had. I was a high school kid, and that's where I started. I always been comfortable in that truck. It's what I learned to drive, um, and I didn't want to get rid of it for a four-wheel drive vehicle. So I just wanted four-wheel drive to go snowboarding in the winter. And then beyond that, things just kind of snowballed from there. And the social aspect of forums, which I really miss, actually, social media has really shifted things in a way that is a bummer. But that's a whole other subject. Maybe dig into that another time. But being able to have archived information and group conversations online in the forum format was fantastic because a lot of people were able to kind of express interest in things, or you can kind of throw spaghetti at the wall with ideas that you have and get feedback over a longer period of time. And it it's just that's just the way it came together, really. Yeah.
How did you get started with building Rugged Rocks?
Yeah. So prior to Rugged Rocks, me and a buddy were helping a family friend run another e-commerce website selling dirt bike parts. So we did that for a few years. Then my buddy, he moved on to other things, a whole different industry. And then, while I was doing that, I was also on the forums and stuff. And so I knew about the e-commerce side of things and was familiar with the off-road industry. I'd been going to local shows like Pomona Off-Road Expo is pretty big down here. And I kind of, I knew my way around the industry, but didn't know a whole lot of people. Then I just took what I learned selling the dirt bike parts and built my own website. And I didn't want to compete with the dirt bike stuff, but I just started selling what I could with different resale accounts that I was able to open. And actually, at first, I was selling Toyota parts, Jeep parts, and kind of everything, just to kind of get the ball rolling. But as time went on, and I was able to get more focused on the Nissan stuff, I weaned off all those other parts and made it just Nissan.
Do you have a favorite Nissan to modify?
So I'm super biased with this, but I'd say the WD-21 platform Pathfinder specifically. That's like, I think it's the easiest to build, such as mine. It's a 90. It doesn't have ABS, so it doesn't get in the way when you're modifying stuff. Manual transmission that holds up for a really long time. It doesn't have 650 catalytic converters you got to worry about. It has one. So there's a lot of flexibility with things that you have to work around on more modern vehicles. The fuel tank's in the very back, so if you want to throw a 4-link suspension system in there, you're not having to move a bunch of stuff. There's plenty of room. You just throw it in. Lots of advantages. Even let's say if you started off with the Pathfinder platform and you wanted to put the hard body cab on there, that's been done. An old friend of mine did that, and it worked out. It was just a great rig. Again, because you're not having to shuffle around everything between the frame rails. It's everything from the frame down is in a very ideal position. And then he was banging up too much sheet metal on his Pathfinder, so he just ditched that whole thing, got a cab from the junkyard, dropped it on, same motor, same interior, same everything, and wheeled it that way for a long time until it eventually became a buggy. But yeah, great platform, and linked in the rear from the factory as well, no leaf spring, so you get tons of travel without really having to change it much straight out of the gate. So if I was going to do like some sort of competition or budget build, like bring an old junker that you think is going to do well, hands down, I would do a Pathfinder.
Over all the years that I've been in and out of your website, one thing that has really stuck out to me is how many different gear sets you guys offer. And it's like such a variety all the way up to 589s, which pretty tall. So what I want to know is, did you do all the homework to find gear sets that would plug into these vehicles, or do you guys have someone building gear sets for you also, or is it a mix of both?
It's a mix of everything. So originally, like the 557s, the 513s, 557s, and 589s for the Nissan H233. So it was very, very common third member. That ran from like the mid 80s up until like 2004, at least here in the States. They're run even, I think they're actually probably still in production in some vehicles overseas. But those gear sets just weren't an OEM part that were available in the States, but they were available for other vehicles that had the same axle overseas. So going through different part numbers, I was able to dig them up and start importing them from Japan. As time went on, those became more difficult to get a hold of, but then also Revolution Gear and Axle, they were starting to come into business a while back, and I knew some of the guys that were involved with getting that ball rolling. And so I told them, I was like, hey, this is something that I think you guys should really do, not just for here in the States for the guys that are doing straight axle swaps, but if you did the front and rear gear set versions of these, you guys can probably sell these to the patrol guys overseas, because the patrols use that same axle, front and rear, but the front's reverse rotation, so high pinion. And so they made those, and that worked out really well for them. And then for us here, it's just, on the occasion where guys are doing straight axle swaps, we're able to fill that need. So 589s, you mentioned those. It is a deep gear, but the first gen and older Xters and Frontiers are geared really deep from the factory to begin with. So a lot of those came with like 463s or 49s on like a 29 or a 30-inch tire. So you can imagine, you do that math and you want to run a 37-inch straight axle swap it, you're running a 557 or 589 gear just to end up back where you were stock.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, very deep gears. So, and that diff is a pretty good size. It's about a 9.25-inch ring gear. So when guys are running even the 589s, they hold up pretty well. I think I've only had one customer blow a set up, which I'm actually surprised about. I thought that they were going to be a bit more problematic at that ratio, but that hasn't been the case. So even the guys that are running the Dana 44s up front, there are 589 Dana 44 gears available, so you're able to do the match with the straight axle swaps that way.
Nice. Yep. We've got someone in the comments is asking, why should I consider a Frontier over a Gladiator for an overlanding rig? Either option he purchases is going to have the bed removed and an Aussie style tray and canopy installed.
Ooh, okay. So
is he considering a new Frontier, the latest generation? Is that what we're going off, you think?
I would assume he's talking about the newest body style, which has been out for a year and a half or so now.
Yeah. Okay. So lots of things to consider, right? In my opinion, I'd say it has something more to do with where you're actually planning on going and how far you want to go. Like basically, how hard are you going to wheel on the way into wherever you're going? You're talking overlanding stuff, you're probably not going to get into anything super hardcore, but having that straight axle up front off the lot is pretty nice, right? However, I don't remember the costs of each of these vehicles right offhand, but you're probably going to end up saving money with the Frontier, right? And one thing with the new Frontier compared to the previous generation is that they did upgrade the diameter of the front axle shaft. So even though the front differential is the same diameter ring gear, it's running an R180 front diff, they did upgrade the shafts. So I think that's going to be less problematic than what we've seen in the prior years. And we also do have an ARB locker available for that front diff as well. So that R180 did have a common problem in years past where if you got a lot of wheel spin on one side and it suddenly catches tractions and just comes to an abrupt halt, it'll snap the spider gears and that whole front diff is toast. So just be aware of that. But what we've also seen over the years is if you put a locker in the front, you get both sides spinning together, you're not jamming stuff up in the same way. Not only don't you have the weaker spider gears from the factory, right? Because you've got, let's say you put an ARB in there, the ARB itself is stronger, and now you're running stronger axle shafts than the previous generation. It's overall going to be a lot more robust and a lot more reliable. So it, it's really going to come down to preference. Those two vehicles are drastically different. But hopefully that information helps make a decision.
Yeah. Let's ask a couple more questions, and we'll get. Josh has a couple questions here as well, but let's get through a couple more on our interview.
I was digging around the website, and I noticed you guys had different dollar amounts. So, like for pesos and Canadian dollars. Do you guys do a bunch of overseas sales or outside the States?
I did at one time. So I mean, I've shipped all over the world. I mean, I've sent stuff Russia, South America, Australia, New Zealand, strange countries at times. It's not a super consistent thing, and it's something that I actually try to stay away from. But at the same time, if someone's in a bind and they can't find parts, I don't like leaving people hanging. So I do everything I can to get to get them taken care of. I don't like leaving people stranded. So even if it's a bit of a pain in the butt sometimes to do the international stuff, especially depending on what it is, it can be a lot of shipping back and forth to get things in the right place to actually ship overseas, and the paperwork and everything involved. It sucks. But if there's no other choice and I'm the guy's last hope, then I'll pull out all the stops and see what I can do.
Yeah, and I'd noticed the patrol stuff on there, and I was like, is there a bunch of them being imported here? Because I think of Australia, I hear about the patrols all the time.
Yeah, I would love to own a patrol one day. One of the Y60s or the Y61s would be really awesome. But yeah, I don't sell too many patrol parts, but it does happen. I just had a guy contact me a few weeks ago wanting quotes on a whole bunch of stuff, but it was more for there were some government vehicles, and for some reason they were being imported just to get worked on, and then they were going back out for something else. So they were literally just here for working parts, and they were leaving again. So you just all sorts of different weird stuff like that, and people typically get a hold of me. They find me inevitably for all sorts of weird projects. So.
Do you find it challenging to build Nissans with how limited the aftermarket is compared to most other brands?
So glad you asked this one. So it can be challenging. You can't exactly just drive a Nissan through a catalog and, knock things off the shelf and end up with a bunch of cool stuff, right? Like you got to work for it a little bit more. But I will say, you've got the way things are now are way, way, way better than they were 15 years ago when I first started, right? 17 years ago, I started, whenever it was, 06, we can do the math on that. So there was nothing. Like Titan swaps were just becoming a thing. The H233B gears, like we were just talking about, 557s and 589s, they were not in the country. 513s were the deepest ones. I found the other ones in Japan from like a stake bed, like a dually stake bed truck, like a little mini stake bed truck in Japan, had the same axle, so I brought those in. I worked with Doug Thorley a lot, to bring headers in. Not even bring them in, but they're made here in the States. Some of the headers they already were doing, like for the 3.0 and the 3. The 3.0 they were already doing. They were discontinued them for a little while, and then I helped them kind of tweak the design a little bit because they were having some problems. But then after we did a little revamp on them, they've been fantastic. I've had mine for, I don't even know how long I've had mine now, actually, the recent version. I think I've had them probably almost 10 years. They've been fantastic. The 3.3 headers they did not make at the time, so I worked on that. A friend of mine had an Xterra that was pretty much stock, and it was a perfect donor vehicle, so kind of bridged the gap, got the truck over to Doug Thorley, brought those to the market. So it just, I've worked on a lot of things over the years, so it's difficult for me to have that perspective of like there's nothing available, because I still hear it all the time, and it's frustrating because a lot of these gaps have already been filled. Yeah, you don't have 20 options for different upper control arms, but at the end of the day, do you need 20 options for different upper control arms? Do we want more companies just reinventing the same thing over and over again that it really isn't offering anything more than other products? Um, and honestly, there becomes a point where the space becomes so competitive that the guys that really know what they're doing in the Nissan space can't afford to keep doing it because there's these other guys that are, full line parts companies that jump in and yeah, they'll make the parts for a little bit, but um, it's a small pond. If more people were wheeling Nissans, then more companies would be building Nissan parts, and it's not easy being in this segment of the off-road industry by any means.
Did the OEM Nissan start with them starting to make the OEM off-road parts like the bumpers and stuff? Did that help?
I think it's helping with interest, but I also haven't really seen a lot of those parts like out in the wild either. So it's something I've kind of kept an eye on. From a search engine perspective, they're ranking well, right? Like if you look for, let's go in Google and look Nissan off-road parts. I was number 1 and 2 in there for 15 years, and now there's a couple other companies that are in there, and one of those is Nissan themselves, which I find really interesting. So it's like, okay, like they're not doing gears and they're not doing um, the Titan swap stuff. It's not hardcore stuff, but it's a lot of accessories, bumpers, rooftop tents, bed rack stuff, um, that sort of thing. So it's on the radar, but it's hard to really give a clear response on that right now.
What do you, speaking of Nissan, like themselves, what do you think of the newest Frontier that came out?
I love the way it looks, and I'll say I actually haven't even driven one yet. I think mostly because there's not a lot of people asking for parts for them either, and this has been a topic of discussion on social media and stuff. And I've tried to put some feelers out lately where I don't understand why the market on these new trucks for aftermarket parts is so extremely low. I don't know if it's just an economic thing or if the trucks are too new, which is something that we saw with the last generation of Frontier and Xteras. It took like probably 3 to 5 years before we really saw people wanting to start changing things. Warranties start running out. People start getting more advanced in their off-road adventures, right? Like they want to go farther, but they wait for the warranty, and then as soon as that happens, then it's on, and they hit the ground running, at least for a little while, right? So it's been a slow uptick with the new truck, and we'll see. And if the demand starts to rise, then I'll take a closer look at it. But I did work with ARB to bring out the new front locker for it, and the response on that has been extremely slow. So I'm kind of in a sit and wait phase on that right now.
You're muted, Ben.
Oops. What's the biggest volume of items you guys are selling?
Well, I mean, I've done a lot of drivetrain over the years, right? So I'd say gears is like my main thing. I've stayed away from doing a lot of suspension stuff just because there's some other companies that I know very well that have done a really good job with it, and I just prefer to kind of stay in my lane rather than go head to head with good guys that are already on top of that little mountain, right? So I let them have it, but if things shift or if there's opportunity to fill in a gap somewhere, I'm definitely open to it. Again, I don't want to reinvent something. I like doing stuff that's new and takes a little creativity or thinking outside the box. And I don't want to do something just for the sake of just having another option, right? Like I like doing things different, try to do things in a way that has a clear advantage over something else. But again, even if it's something suspension related, I'll probably talk to one of the guys that I know at some of these other companies. They're like, "Yeah, I was thinking about doing this. If you're not going to do it, then I might do it," kind of thing. And we're pretty open about that sort of stuff. We bounce ideas off each other from time to time. But at this point in the Nissan circles, I mean, a lot of the stuff is already available. And it's so funny you asked that other question a minute ago about the limited aftermarket, because that's really the stance, is like we have options. It's just not a ton of them. And just a quick funny note, I was on social media the other day. I think I was on Instagram or something, flipping through, and somebody had posted that Jeep XJs need more aftermarket support, and I almost fell out of my chair. I was like, you guys are out of your mind.
At this point, there's more aftermarket support for XJs than there are XJs left. Like,
yeah.
I was like, you guys are out of control. I was like, Nissan guys complain there's not enough aftermarket support. And then I go through Instagram and they're like, well, Jeep XJ guys are also complaining there's not enough aftermarket support. So I don't know what to tell you.
So we've heard Aaron talk about his precious Titan swap. How big of a market is that? And is it done like a lot, or what do you think about that?
I think the market is still pretty strong there. There's still a lot of people that are getting these vehicles second and third hand that are, they're just getting into it and they're just learning about it. So I'd say suspension is selling much faster and much more plentiful than like the gears and locker stuff. Gears and lockers, I'd say, is for the guys that are really going to that next level, because not only does performance suspension help the performance of the vehicle, but it makes the vehicle look cooler, right? And like, who doesn't want to look cool? So when you start looking at lifts, it's just the go-to thing, right? Like, everybody wants to lift their truck. Everybody wants to off-road better. Everybody thinks, shocks are cool, and coilovers are awesome. And that's just, not just the cool thing, but it's the performance thing. A lot of the stuff that I've spent a lot of time with over the years, it changes the performance of your vehicle off-road, but you spend all this money and it's all in the diffs and it gets all buttoned back up and you don't see it. Right. And so I think it's a big drawback. But yeah, the Titan swaps are definitely still relevant, and I know those parts are still moving for sure.
So you're a big proponent of sassing rigs, since we're talking about front ends here.
I have, yeah. I've been very involved with that over the years. Cooled off the last few years, but yeah, we can dig into that.
At what point does someone need that? So I've dumped a bunch of money into my Nissan, and then I'm getting people coming at me saying, oh, you just need to sass it. You just need to sass it. So you need to solid axle swap your front end. Get rid of that IFS, put a solid axle in there. At what point does someone need that in their rig?
I'll answer that with a question. Do you feel like you need that in your rig?
I don't know. I don't know if I've ever owned a vehicle. I guess I've owned one vehicle, but it wasn't a wheeler that had a solid front axle. So I don't know if I need it or not. What am I missing?
I feel like
what am I missing by not having a solid axle up there?
Well, it really comes down to how you're wheeling and where you're wheeling, right? Like, is your vehicle, the way it's set up now, getting you to where you want to go?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Then don't change it. I will say that the guys that are like the second gen guys that are straight axle swapping their trucks, they're pretty hardcore, because these trucks are not the little mini trucks that Nissan was building in the late 80s and early 90s, right? Like, these mid-sized trucks are pretty big. You start putting a straight axle swap under it, and you throw 37-inch tires after it, and it's a big truck. No matter what you do, no matter how low you try to build it, they are big. And at that point, you're looking at just having a big truck and wheeling really big stuff. And so I'd say that there's definitely a big jump, right? It's not like you go from a Titan swap and doing a solid axle swap on that generation of truck. It's just a little bit more. Like, it's a whole different league of wheeling, to be honest. So if you're not looking for a big jump in rock crawling performance, I would leave the truck alone. The cool thing about Titan swaps is it works very well for what it is. They drive great for what they are, and the travel is just, it's great. I have a second gen Xterra as well, and it's probably never going to get solid axle swapped. It's got a Titan swap in it. I drive it every day, and it's just a fantastic setup. I don't want to change it. And not only that, but I do have another truck that's straight axle swap, right? So I've got a couple options. But if that thing was ever to end up with a straight axle under it, it would probably be because something catastrophic happened to it where I couldn't drive it on the street anymore, and it just would probably get torn down and turned into a buggy and just pretty much be like a Johnson Valley rig or something. But outside of that, I leave it alone because for what I use it for, it does the job.
I love the question that you asked him for that, Stephen, that instead of, oh yes, of course you need to spend your money. It's like, no, spend your money on what you need to do. Tell us about Rugged Routes. What type of maps do you offer? Features come with the maps, and what type of people use your maps?
Yeah, so in that side of things, it's a lot of side-by-side people and a lot of race trucks, people exploring down in Baja, Mexico. But yeah, primarily I'd say the UTV market is really big on that. The maps themselves, I do really high detailing, really comb through different OHV areas, such as Johnson Valley, Ocotillo Wells, Glamis, stuff like that. So down here in California, we have some open riding areas where there's a kind of a trail system within the bounds, but you're not legally bound to those trails. So you can go off trail and go do whatever you want. Knock your heart out. Just go play. So within those areas, there's a lot of points of interest and different existing trails that have known trail ratings and that sort of stuff. So I'll comb through, mark everything, color code everything, and offer that up on a map card. So it's just a single purchase. There's no subscription or anything, which I think is a big deal, especially this day and age where the just so many business models these days are, give us $10 every month, and you're like stuck. And I think it kind of sucks, honestly. So I go off of just like, look, here's a product. You get it on an SD card. You pop the SD card into a Lowrance GPS, and you're good off. You're off grid. You don't need any service or anything. Everything's preloaded, and it takes the homework out of it too, right? So some of these other apps and things that that a lot of people are using, you have to have an internet connection at first. You have to do your homework and know where you're going and make sure you download the data ahead of time. And it takes time and more research. Whereas my approach is a little bit different. So that's for the really high detail stuff. Then I have some broader stuff, less detail, but I can cover the whole country on one SD card. And moving forward, yeah, but it's not satellite imagery on those though. It's all just topo and USGS data, compiled with a few other things as well. So there's a lot there, but I definitely put a lot more work into the smaller high detail maps.
Can you guys imagine only having topographical maps for the entire US on an SD card? Only topo maps?
Only?
Oh man, I like all my options. Like
I'm just joking because for the longest time we didn't even have that. Like it wasn't a thing. We had paper maps, and so I'm just making a joke. I think that's awesome that you have all that on an SD card.
It's a lot of
that's
data.
Pretty cool.
Yeah,
it is a lot of data because that's the entire US. So.
It brings me back to what was it? Onyx. They have their hunting SD cards, and it's like per state, and then
so similar to how they started out with those hunting SD cards, is kind of how I started doing it, right, per OHV area. And the OHV areas is kind of nice because there's a predefined boundary that I can work with. Outside of that, there's a lot of BLM roads and stuff that you can ride, but they're not super popular around the OHV areas. Although there is some other area, it gets complicated when you start talking about like BLM or like California City, where they kind of have their own rules and things that at first glance you think, oh, this should be black and white. Like, can I ride here or can I not ride here? Can I take my UTV or my dirt bike or can I not? right? And it seems very black and white, but there's so many rules in different types of land, whether it's state land or a city that has their own rules, or um, so many things. And that's how I end up getting more involved with the land use stuff with like Corva and Blue Ribbon and those guys, where I just had to get more educated on some of this stuff. But anyways, I'm kind of going off on a tangent. One of the things I wanted to note real quick is here in the near future, it's going to be very likely that I start rolling out some maps that are kind of in between. So rather than just having the really big option of covering the whole country, or the really small option of having high detail for an OHV area, likely going to be rolling out statewide stuff as well, with some level of satellite imagery, as high resolution as I can fit on an SD card that's supported by the GPSs I'm working with. So a lot of data to work with there, but no shortage of things to do in that space by any means. But there's other things I'm working on as well that interface with the GPSs. I'm not sure if you're aware of those too, but maybe we can jump into that when you guys are ready.
Well, so I don't have a Lowrance GPS system. I do have a Nintendo Switch that has an SD card. Can I just shove that in there? Will it work with my Nintendo Switch?
Unfortunately, no Nintendo Switch compatibility.
Yeah. I bet in the overlanding sphere, you would sell a metric buttload. Can you imagine how Instagram worthy that would be?
Oh, that's funny. Now I want to look at it.
Yeah. Why don't you tell us what you were just hinting at there about some accessories to go along with it?
Yeah, so one of the really cool things about Lowrance that a lot of people don't realize at first is that they have different networking functionalities. So not only do they have Ethernet and wireless like Wi-Fi capability, but they have an interface called NEMA 2000, which is a marine standard that runs, or I guess it's a marine standard that incorporates CAN bus. So you guys are probably familiar with wiring in modern vehicles. It runs CAN bus between different modules and it controls all sorts of stuff, right? Well, NEMA 2000 runs CAN bus that also connects all sorts of stuff. And I am building the more stuff for the off-road industry. So it uses that marine standard, but is bringing additional functionality, starting out really focused on the race guys. So I've got a device that's prototyped. It's on the website if you guys want to check it out. But it's a little device called a trail mark, and it plugs into the CAN bus.
I saw
there.
that.
Yeah, so
it looks like one of those things I see in the TikTok reels where someone's playing the drums on the keypad buttons.
Oh yeah, it's basically just a macro keypad. Yeah, there you go. You got it there. So that macro keypad can be custom programmed by the user. So in a race scenario where they're going to go down a week or two, let's say it's like one of the Baja races, they go down a week or two before, they pre-run the race course and they start dropping a bunch of notes. That way they are familiar with it and their co-drivers calling out what's coming up next before they can even see it. Right? So they're able to stay informed and make quicker decisions. So historically, they would go down and they use the mark waypoint button on the GPS. A little screen pops up, you name it, you select your icon, select the color of the icon, you hit save, you back out of that screen and you're back on the GPS. But you got to go through all those steps, at whatever speed that they're pre-running in. Usually they try to pre-run pretty slow so they can actually get plentiful quality notes. But with this setup, you can pre-program all of the different notes that you use for a race into the keypad, and now you're just single pressing these buttons and they're popping up on the screen in real time, and you can run full race speed pre-running and this thing will keep up to you. Like if you were to just jam on the keyboard, it will go nuts and drop everything that you hit. It doesn't skip a beat. So
so you could program in like a sand trap here and Rocky go fast here type stuff.
Yep. So you get as detailed as you want. So if there's some sort of hazard, like you mentioned, like a rock on right, you can drop a rock, or whatever it is. If there's a rise, or if you want to drop a note, just reminding you that this section you can be wide open. 120 miles an hour, just pin it, just go. you mark that in there too. So no matter what it is, you can select one of the icons that are in the Lowrance already. Like there's an ID number associated with it. So you program this key with that ID number and the note that you want associated with that icon, and you're good to go. So it was used for some pre-running down to the Baja 500 a few months ago, and some of the big teams are getting wind of it now, and they're really wanting these things. So this is something I got to wrap up here pretty quick, and hopefully have in production by the end of the year. So
have you guys ever done that thing where like you got a buddy and he's writing a text message, and then you lean over and just start smashing on his keyboard, trying to mess him up?
Yeah, I mean that could happen here too, right? Like
I so
leave the co-driver alone.
Never see one of these like if they pull into a pit stop, just want to lean in there and just start smashing those buttons and leave 10,000 checkpoints at the pit stop.
They would be very upset. Yeah, but you know, so in most of the races, they get the chance to pre-run, so all these notes would be done ahead of the race, and then when they're racing, they don't have this device anymore. But there are some races where they can't pre-run, but it's a multi-lap race. So in those types of scenarios, this could also be useful, so they can run the first lap, take all their notes, you know, on the fly, and then on the succeeding laps, they will be more informed, and they can basically maybe use the first lap as a pre-run lap. Obviously, you don't want to go too slow, but you know, it's one idea. Lots of use cases for it, really. So
SD cards have gotten pretty big on space, like a terabyte. I think I've seen now.
Yeah.
How limited, and it's all limited by the device. How limited are you on the size of on those?
So officially, right now, it's interesting you bring this up because there's some things shifting in the Lowrance world. Historically speaking, in the last handful of generations of GPSs, there's a 32 gigabyte limit, and that has to do with the way the card is formatted, right? It only supports like FAT32 for the computer people out there. So officially, FAT32 has a 32 gig limit. There are some hacks to go beyond that, but it's not officially supported by Lowrance. Now, just the other day, I found out that there's a software update that brought in support for what seems like at least 128 gig cards. Now, I've contacted my rep at Lowrance, the tech support line at Lowrance, emailed one of the software engineers at Lowrance, and nobody seems to know when this change was actually done, and nobody knows that it even happened, at least with the contacts that I have. So it's really strange. It's actually something we're digging into right now. But based on some documentation I did find for one of the newer GPSs, there's a discrepancy between two different sources of specifications, but in one of them, it is showing a 256 gig support. But I think that just might be tested support, but it probably goes beyond that given the way technology is working these days. We don't really have the same types of hard limits that we've had with prior technology. So I'm thinking right now we can do at least 256 gigs on a card as of a couple weeks ago, but we're still figuring that out.
That'll open up the amount of mapping you'll be able or upgrade the detail that you're allowed to do.
Yep, huge. And that's one of the reasons that I'm starting to look at doing that in-between mapping now, right? Because trying to even do low resolution satellite imagery, say for the whole state of California, and then have some useful data layered on top of that, it was going to go far beyond 32 gigs of data. Even with all the tactics that I have in place for trying to compress the data as much as possible without losing quality, I use only lossless compressions, but it's still, you can fill up a 32 gig card really, really fast, especially if you guys realize how much data it actually takes to store a full resolution data set of imagery from USGS, just California. It's multiple terabytes of raw data, and that's 10-to-1 compressed. It's a ton.
Just thinking of like my Gaia maps, it's easily a couple hundred gigs.
Mm-hmm. And the raw data is terabytes upon terabytes. So to actually be able to process it and have it usable on one of these units where you can zoom in and out, quickly. So just to give you guys a little bit behind the scenes peek of how it actually works, it's on a tiled system. So when you're zoomed all the way in, you're looking at the full resolution image. but as you zoom out, you're actually looking at that same image that's been downsampled, but it's actually a separate lower quality layer. So the further you zoom out, the lower quality you're looking at. And that's just so the GPS or even on the computer, like Google Earth and all sorts of services work the same way. You can imagine if you want an image of, let's say, all of Southern California, you want to zoom out, well, that's still going to be hundreds of gigabytes worth of data, and you can't realistically load all of that and downsample it on the fly just so it can be displayed on the screen. So you have to do all of that ahead of time, and it's all in a layered, tiled system that allows you to step through those layers as you zoom in and out. So it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of planning, right? And you downsample all of it in a way that saves space. So it gets complicated, but I think you guys get the idea.
Is Lowrance even marketing their GPS systems for anything but fish yet? I know these were fish finders back in the day.
Yep. So they used to market them for off-road purposes as well. And they still have like a lower end unit, like the Baja Trophy, which I don't do anything with just because the hardware isn't powerful enough to power everything that I use these things for. But they've gone through a handful of changes over the years. Not to say that they don't want the GPS stuff or the off-road stuff to go away by any means. It's just that their marine focus is so much more advantageous that they can't really put a lot into the off-road sector. But along with that, we haven't lost anything by them not doing an off-road specific unit either. So their older HDS units, like their HDS Bajas, they were the exact same unit as the fish finding ones. It's just it didn't come with the transducer in a box, and they put external antenna that we use on the race trucks in the box instead. So I packaged those the same way that they have done in the past. The only other thing that they used to do that was a little more advantageous for off-road is they used to do map only units. So it was only a chart plotter and it didn't have any of the sonar connections on the back. But by doing that, it was taking up resources and time on the production line to build a lower cost unit that was selling less than anything else that they were making. And they ended up were actually like losing money on it, right? So what made more sense for them is to just not do the chart plotter only units anymore and just do all full featured units and then just package them with different accessories in the box and let them all go out the door the same way. And really the cost difference at retail was pretty minimal. So again, yeah, it throws people off like, oh, you sent me a fish finder. It's like, no. It's the same thing that all the race truck guys are running. It's just, yes, obviously we're not going to be finding fish in the middle of Baja, right? At least on land. But all the chart plotter stuff, the NEMA 2000 stuff, Sirius radio, you can run through it. Digital switching, we can do all sorts of off-road related stuff. Just the terminology is a little bit, it's geared toward marine, but we're not losing anything.
Gotcha. Well, earlier I mentioned that Josh had a question and I forgot all about it. So let's get this one out here real quick. So Josh says,
okay.
How much power would you say is the max to put through a 3-rib M205 that has an ARB locker and Revolution 410 gears?
I have had some people throw down some power far beyond what I would recommend. I would say if you're getting north of 400 horsepower, well, on an M205, it depends how you wheel though too, because you can break anything with far less power, right?
That's true.
Yeah.
So that's really what comes down to. I mean,
yeah, you could bend axles on a wagon road. I mean,
yeah, you can blow up stuff with not a lot of power.
Yeah, look at those Toyota guys.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
True. They break stuff without a lot of power.
Yeah,
Unlike
but
us Nissan guys,
they're
we
at
have a lot of
10,000
power.
RPMs. It's totally different when you're just hanging it off the limiter for 10 minutes straight.
You guys talk about guys out in Johnson Valley, how they're just out there at back door, just standing on the skinny pedal, crossing their fingers.
No, just Toyota guys in general with their little.
Or just in general, doesn't matter where they are. Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know what? It's always a good time when they show up, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh man.
That's why my friends invite me out still.
Yeah.
So do you have any new or upcoming products that you can tell us about?
In the Nissan world, or either way?
Either way.
You guys.
Either way, any product.
So in the Nissan world, there's not a lot happening at the moment, but I have my ear to the ground on a few things that I might be bringing back. So if anybody's out there listening that has been through the website and they see something that I used to offer but I don't anymore, please contact me so I know that you're interested. I'm always up for bringing things back as long as it makes sense. You know, I don't have to do things in a crazy high numbers of production or anything. Usually, if we have like 10 or 20 people that are seriously interested in moving forward on something, we can typically bring something back. On the GPS side, there's a lot of stuff. You know, I mentioned digital switching. We're in the middle of converting over the software that's marine focused or doing something like an S-Pod that is controlled through the Lowrance. So you wouldn't have any physical switches. So it could be pretty advantageous for guys that don't have a lot of space for physical switches. But if you can get a GPS in there, you can control all sorts of stuff. We talked about the trail mark. That's in prototype status right now. There's 3 of them in the wild, and that'll be coming down the pipe. Engine data is another thing that I'm hoping to do by the end of the year and have in a Nissan Xterra that's going to be racing in King of the Hammers this coming February. So that should be at least prototyped by then. So that's going to be a lot easier for competition vehicles, so they don't have to put in a bunch of separate gauges or run multiple systems. Let's say like there's a bunch of different digital dash companies, right? And you're looking for basic data. So if you can put, let's say, a large GPS on the co-driver side and say a smaller, like 7-inch on the driver side, network them together, and then have the module that converts engine data from the ECU into the NEMA 2000 bus, then now you have a configurable screen that doesn't only do navigation, but you can run split screen or run data overlays of the engine on top of the chart as well. So it becomes a very, very flexible system.
Wow.
Yeah. So so lots of accessories that are coming into play there. I've got some other ideas that I don't want to talk about right now, but just because I'm not sure if they're going to move forward. But I've got a whiteboard in my office that's got all sorts of stuff, like ideas, and just I've always said the bigger the whiteboard, the bigger the idea, and I have a lot of whiteboards. So.
Josh asks if you're going to come out with a manual transfer case conversion kit for the 2nd gen Xterras and Frontiers.
Really easy answer. No. So the reason being, we're not going to do it. The reason being, we looked into doing it about 10 years ago, and maybe even longer, 12, 13 years ago. We pulled them apart, and it's like, okay, it's doable, but it doesn't seem like the juice is worth the squeeze. I've been getting this question a handful of times recently, actually, and I've been kind of surprised at this coming up now, especially after all these years. And it doesn't seem like there's really a really good way to do it. And if you're really wheeling on that level, you're probably like to the point where you need a manual shifted transfer case. You're probably going to want to look into something more robust, like doing just swapping an Atlas or something. I know they're not cheap, but there's some other options out there. So recently re-released Atlas transfer case adapters. So if you are wheeling on that level, then it's something that you should probably look into. If the Atlas itself is outside the budget of what you need to stick within, then there are some other options that you can probably pull out of other vehicles and make work. It's going to take more work. Insulation wise, the Atlas is going to be more straightforward, although it's still a lot of work, but it's been done many times at this point and it's pretty well documented. So that's really just what I would recommend. I don't know the details of somebody else that I heard rumor of doing a manual conversion, I don't really know where that's at or what. Yeah, I really don't know anything about the project other than it exists and someone is supposed to be coming out with it, allegedly. But um, we'll see. We'll see how that goes. But I'm not going to touch it.
Gotcha. All right, I got one final question here. I want to know if you think that the Xterra will ever come back as a proper body-on-frame SUV.
Ooh.
Just speculate.
Yeah, I would love to see it come back. But with the track record of what Nissan's done over the last couple decades to the vehicles that were respectable wheelers, I think there's a very, 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 very small chance. You know, the new styling of the new Frontier is giving me hope that they haven't given up on a capable four-wheel drive. But it's hard to keep my hopes up at this point. So I don't think it's going to happen, but I would love to see it.
Yeah, they kind of stabbed us with the Pathfinder there when they went from body on frame to mommy soccer unibody thing.
Well, the crazy thing is, yeah, I mean, they kind of did the in between, right? So they had the WD-21 like mine, and then after that they went to the R50 platform, which is a unibody, but still had a great following. And actually, the springs and shocks from Old Man Emu, those have sold pretty well for a very, very long time. So the guys really like those things. And I've had people from like search and rescue and firefighter type industry people that are really loading the heck out of those things to carry around a lot of gear, as well as overlanders and other people that are using them in the dirt recreationally. But they have a pretty decent following in the Nissan circles. You don't hear about them as much as the Xterras and Frontiers, but they are definitely there. Then after that, that's when they went full crossover, and then everybody just kind of sobbed and wanted to ignore that it happened. It sucks, you know. But yeah, I don't think the Xterra is going to come back. But if it does, I think it would be really smart if they want to be a player in the space. That's what they're going to have to do, and I think they know it. So it's just a matter of if they want to jump back in the pool or not.
Kind of like with the Bronco coming back.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I mean, Credit Ford waited a long time for that to happen, but you know, hopefully Nissan decides they want to have a little fun again and can make it happen.
Well, Stephen, where can our listeners find you? Like, is it Rugged Rocks everything?
Rugged Rocks, you know, for Nissan stuff, ruggedrocks.com. GPS stuff, ruggedroutes.com. And on Facebook and Instagram, pretty active on Instagram for both of the brands. So yeah, check me out on there. And if anybody has questions, I work best through email, especially probably now through the end of the year. I'm going to be pretty buried with some of these projects that are running a bit behind schedule of where I want to be. So I'm going to be leveraging email a lot more than I like. I don't like leaving people hanging on the phone. I anxiously wait by the phone every day. Like I hate missing phone calls. And if I do miss them, I try to call people back as quickly as possible. But for the sake of efficiency, I can't speak. Sake of efficiency and time management, yeah, email is going to be the best bet for the next handful of months.
All right, guys. Next week, we're going to cover 5 underrated off-road accessories. So be sure and tune in for that.
Yeah. And thank you, everyone who listens to us weekly and stick around for these extra long shows. We appreciate you guys. Thanks for sharing us with your friends and your family and helping us grow. And God bless America.
We had someone on Twitch like the entire night.
Don't forget to visit Patriot Patch and join the Patch of the Month Club. Check out our Gaia affiliate link for up to 40% off. Also, don't forget to head over to Warren Medical Gear Outfitters and Colby Valve to see all their great gear. We're a proud part of the Firearms Radio Network. Got a comment or question? Send it to us through our webpage at firearmsradio.net or through our social media channels by searching for Off-Road Podcast. Also, you can listen to us live at overlandradio.com Mondays at 7 p.m. Pacific. When off-road, please remember to have fun, tread lightly, be safe, and courteous. Thanks for listening.